Okay, here's a different angle. Yeah, that looks like a bit better to see. I can bring you a bit closer too. There we go. So I'm not sure what size these beer tankards have to be yet, so I'm just going to make a few and just see what their volume. They have to be 14 to 16 ounces. So these pieces of clay are 1 3/4, I think. I'm getting 16 from a bag. No, 1.5 pounds of clay. There we go. So this clay is a lot nicer to throw. Right. Now that's very wide at the top for a beer tankard, even though they're going to shrink. So let's collar it a touch. That looks a bit better. Here's that new rib. See, I've got the point where I can get right underneath there, so I can finish the glaze at the top there if I want to fire these without glaze on the bottom, and then that bit underneath you don't really see it. But the other ribs are hard to use, but this one now I can do that. It's much better because it doesn't have that large right angle. Because I won't be trimming much out of these. Well, that's right, I have to put writing on these. So let's reposition that. I have to write the name of the pub. So I've got to give myself much more space at the bottom. When I lived in England back in the 1970s and 80s, the local pub there had beer tankards behind the bar, and everybody had their own beer tankard. So I think it's a nice tradition. You don't even have to have your name on it. There could be some design that you've had put on it to identify it as yours, and the barkeeper will just remember if you're a local. I don't think that happens as much these days, but maybe that's something that should come back. Of course, now everybody mostly eats at pubs. It's not so much a drinking establishment. In England, everybody lived within walking distance of their local pub. That's probably changed too since I've been there. There you go, a beer tankard. Okay, so now I guess I'm going to end up ruining this piece maybe, but this is about 18 ounces, maybe 19 ounces of water. And I'm going to see how much the tankard holds. Whoa, it's only just over half filled the piece. So let's see what happens. I think this will collapse now, but nope. Now, I'm not going to shrink the amount of clay down to do the next one, but I am going to, let's see if I can get this off the wheel. That was quite a trick, eh? I thought that was going to bend the piece over. Well, let's get the water out of the inside. Just bent it a little bit. I can straighten that. And for my next trick, no potters were hurt in the making of this movie, by the way. There we go. Alright, so we basically saved the piece. But, you know, I'm trying to think how else to do that. I need to know how much the thing's going to hold. I don't want to make 100 of these and have them way too big. Well, this is that splash pan that's a bit... I'm using this wheel for the first time, as I said. That's only a 1.5 pound ball of clay. I hate to think to go down to a pound, because I could easily get that size, I think, from a pound, but it wouldn't be as durable. Yeah, I can actually feel a stiff piece of clay in this one too. Well, I would say that's going to be it, but I've got to make them a bit bigger because of the shrinkage. Throw that little guy in at the top. So, the bottom again. Now I've got to make it so that I've got to be able to stamp in that section. So the name of the bar will be there. Well, we'll see how close we are with this. I still think this will be a little big. Get some more water. So here we go again. I think I have about 18 ounces. That's the ounces there. So I would say 18 in here, and he wants 14 to 16 after firing. So let's pour it in. Okay, now we're getting there. There's about just about under an inch to the top. So that's the size, and a little less maybe that I've got to do, but I would say that size. And let's see if we can get this out again. And there we go. That's it. You can hear my cat meowing. They go upstairs and then, there we go. So we're going to say I have to make them that height, so I'm going to go for a bit shorter. And I'm going to measure the bottom. So that's the width of the bottom. And the top, I'm just going to say that I'm going to recognize that kind of tapering, and that will be it. So let's do one more next and see whether I get it. Should be able to get it by the next one. And now we need to pull some handles for those tankards which have been drying overnight. So I just got about a pound of clay here, and I got another piece. I'm going to make 19 handles. I have 19 tankards, so basically this is about a pound and a half. And we need to... There are lots of ways of making handles, so you really can do it in different ways. I'm sure you can find video after video of doing this. This is how I was taught by Greg Allen when I was 17 years old. And it's always worked, so I just kept doing it. Your hand is a different size hand to mine. And everybody will have a character, you know, that's created by the way you hold the clay. And I like that. I think that makes everybody's pottery different. And that's the key with pottery. I mean, all of us should be trying to achieve a style that is ours, and our pottery looks different to other people. So all I'm doing is I started off just stroking the clay, and you have to keep your hand really wet. So dip your hand in water and make it so the water, you don't have to bend over much. You've got your water right there, because your back will hurt. If you have to pull 19 of these, your arms are going to be up in the air for a long time. And if your arms get tired, my teacher told me, hold your arms up higher. He didn't say let them down, he said hold them higher. And it worked. It's just changing the position, so keep your hands at different positions, basically. But I'm stroking the clay all the way down. Now, let's see if I can get close to the camera and you can see. That's the gap between my fingers and my thumb. So it's not round, it's actually more of a sort of curve with a little flat belt part by my thumb. So the clay will basically change to the shape of your hand. But you stroke it all the way down, and every so often when you're doing all the way down, you go a little bit extra at the bottom, and that's because a lump develops at the bottom, and if you're not careful, when you hit that lump, you'll break the clay off. And this is your handle at the bottom. So you want to keep that shaped really nicely. Turn it around completely about every 6 to 10 pulls. And you're just stroking, you're not grabbing the clay, you're just stroking down, and gravity does the work. And then look at it and decide what kind of piece you've got, and if you need a thick or a thin area at the top. And when you think you've got something like you need, you can always trim a bit off at the top and a bit off at the bottom. But basically, you just snap it off. If your hand is too wet at that point, it will drop. So make sure that your hand isn't too wet when you snap it off. Then you've got the beginnings of another handle. So you start stroking, and then 2 or 3 pulls at the bottom. As soon as you feel like your fingers catch at the bottom, do 2 or 3 pulls extra at the bottom. Turn it around every 6 to 10 pulls. And as long as it's lubricated, you can keep pulling. But as soon as you feel like it's starting to get a bit sticky, then you dip your hand in the water. Alright, so another thing you can do is just pull the water off your thumb a little bit, and just grab the handle with that dry part of your thumb and tear it off. Alright, so every so often you have to go a bit higher up to pull some more clay down. Turn it around completely. Dip your hand in the water as soon as you feel any drag. A few pulls at the bottom just to thin it a bit down there. Turn it around again. Look at it. Pull the water off your thumb, even a bit off your forefinger if you want, and then just snap it off where you think you need to snap it off. You'll get used to, I'll pull these up a bit higher so you can see, but you'll get used to seeing the length that you need for a certain sort of mug. That will just come with time. But really concentrate on that bottom bit if you feel any lump. So, quick look. Don't forget to drag the water. You'll only forget once, and when it falls out your hand, you'll always remember that after. Yeah, I feel like all the mistakes I've made, it'd be nice if all my students in my classes could avoid making those. And now I'm doing the videos, trying to think of all the things I've made over the years, mistake-wise. It's costly to make mistakes in pottery, especially if you've already made the piece and it's been fired once and then it breaks in the kiln. You can't recycle the clay once it's gone through the kiln. Alright. So this is a pound of clay, and these are tankard handles, so they're big. So I think I'm going to get 7 out of this pound of clay. When I'm doing mug handles for just regular coffee mugs, I can get 10 to 11 out of a pound of clay. The tankards are obviously a bigger handle. Should have dragged some water. This might be a bit too little, but I'll pull it anyway. See what we can get from that tiny piece of clay. There we go. So what do we get? 3, 6, 7 handles from a pound. But these are long. They're about, I would say that's 11 inches long. All right. 19 handles exactly from that amount of clay. So that's 2.5 pounds of clay, 19 tankard handles. All right. That would have been about 30 regular handles. Right. All right. Okay, handles have been sitting for about 15 minutes or so. The clay was a little soft, so I'm not sure if I can do this yet or not, but usually I leave them for about half an hour or so. The mugs, let me just show you this, are still easy to bend. So that means I can leave a fingerprint in the clay, but it's not, so that you bend it and it's really kind of, distorted out of shape. This clay was thrown yesterday. This one's a bit stiffer, and that one's a bit stiffer, depending on where they were facing in the cupboard. So when they're a little stiffer, I just sort of wet it over the area. I want them to be tacky enough so I don't have to do any scratching and scoring, basically. And then these ones were pretty soft already. And so all I do is you pick up one of your handles, put it so it sticks out of your finger a little bit, squash it down a touch, so you've got a nice join area, and then you place it. You can do wherever you want. I always leave about 1.5 centimeters from the top, and I add a little thumb, home for the thumb that I call it. Just sit down a little bit so you can see the angle maybe. There you go. So basically right there, and then I usually put a couple of fingers underneath and bend it in. Take a look to make sure I can get at least 3 fingers in the piece. And then basically smudge it in, move it around a little bit, break off a little bit so I leave 1 centimeter, and just curl it up over the top. And then I always throw a little bit, just a little tiny piece of clay in that little touch there, so I can make it a little, because my fingers leave a groove, like a channel, and I always fill that in at the top there, so the handle has a thicker join area. Mirandi. And then I do this because I'm doing a production line of mugs. I have to have a system. So you start on one. He's going to try and knock the handles off. So once again, a couple of fingers underneath, curl it in, move it around, eyeball it to make sure you got it straight. Leave about 1.5 centimeters, curl it up over the top, take a little bit of clay, and you may like that groove anyway, but I stick a button on top for a home for the thumb, and so I like to fill that in just a tiny bit. It gives me more clay contact with the actual sort of mug. I don't want anything to be broken off easily. So wipe my hands now, because I'm going to be holding a paintbrush. I don't want clay all over that. Alright, I have two paintbrushes. This one is almost new. This one's worn out. So the ferrule, I think it's called, around the metal part, it acts as a modeling tool as well. But the first thing I do is I put the paintbrush in opposite the bit where the joint is at the bottom, and then use my thumb and I press down hard to smudge the handle out, and then pull either side, and that's the handle joint down there. Same here, press hard just to get the joint, smudge side to side. See, the piece is so soft in that area, it doesn't take much to join at all. Bottom, I use this worn out paintbrush, and I use it like a modeling tool to get that piece of clay off there. And I simply use the metal part of the brush. I've shown this in a previous video, I'm sure, so. But it was probably coffee mugs, and these are tankards. But you're simply modeling around to smooth it in. Now go back to the other paintbrush, which is much softer, and you're just basically cleaning it up, getting rid of your fingerprints that you try not to put on, but it's almost inevitable. So really go around that joint area. Now it's hard to see, but what I do down here, I'll see if you can get the angle right, is I push my brush down where that joint is there to kind of make sure that's joined, but I pull the brush up the handle, and it makes the handle stick out a little further, so you've got more space to put your hand. Because a lot of guys really like to hold a mug like this with the hand through the handle, and all that. So, and that's it. That's all of them. So I'll give you a close-up of the side there. So they're all very similar. And these mugs are all, I was getting pretty good at doing the size towards the end of the throwing there. This is the little button, so it's the ends of the clay that I tore off. And I simply place it on the top. And everybody, if you start doing something like this, should come up with a stamp that's personally yours to actually press into that piece of clay. It's like a way of signing your pieces. I mean, I don't use a clay stamp. I sign the bottom of my pieces so people can find me, my name and my town where I live and the province. But I also use this little stamp that identifies my pieces because the glaze sometimes covers my my signature if I'm using a dark glaze, or if it's an opaque glaze. But I mostly use my oatmeal glaze because it does allow me to sign on top of the glaze. What are you doing? He really wants something, doesn't he? There we go. So that's the actual wall of clay. And then I have this little stamp. Mine's just a spiral. I've had this stamp for 10 years now. The other one, I don't know what happened to it. And you just push that down. And this, once again, adds that little extra clay there, so that if you're putting slip on something, that allows it to absorb some of the slip. More, boy, he's, there we go. Alright, and that's how to put handles on. And Mirandi was my helper, I guess, for this one. Move that out of the way now. So if you can learn to throw thin, you don't need to trim any other area, just that little bottom area. I was throwing these a little thick because they're meant to be used in a commercial situation, so they're heavier than my normal pieces. But that's trimming, basically getting the piece with a nice finished foot. Another thing you can do when you're trimming is put yourself a little hollow area underneath. So by taking that area down a bit, you can actually give yourself a little cavity on the inside of your foot, so if you want to, you can actually put some glaze in there. But because I fire on stilts, I'm not so worried about that a lot of the time. Right, so you've got that nice little hollow area where you can sign, put some glaze over it, and then just leave your foot with raw clay. But I do fire in stilts, so I glaze the entire foot. Another use for duct tape. A million uses for that stuff. So they're trimmed now, and I'm just going to flute. I think you can see a bit better there. This clay is a bit drier than I would normally have it. This will just add a little bit of interest to the glazing. Let's get that back in there a bit. I think you can see it's a bit dry. See whether this tool does a bit better. Yeah, this is much nicer. These are just regular potato peelers. There's lots of different styles of these around at the moment, so these are my favorites, but they're also the cheapest. There you go. So timing, as I said earlier, is just everything with pottery, because just a little too hard, that other one, and the tool, I had to really press hard, and there's a danger of cracking the pot then as well. So paying attention to your pieces when you're working, you really have to just kind of come back regularly and take a look at what you're doing. Because if this was too soft, the trimmings would stick to the tool. If it's too hard, the tool just doesn't dig in enough. And that's actually perfect. And this clay has a speckle to it, so it's going to show that up too. When you're throwing, the mud of the wheel it covers up that speckle. So trimming or fluting like this, you can expose that quality of the clay that the glaze will pick up as well. And after this, it's down to firing and glazing, so I'll talk to you a bit later. Hi, they're finally fired. Here's my measuring cup. You can't quite see this, I don't think, but this mug is full with about just under a centimeter from the top. And I'm supposed to make these 14 to 16 ounces. So let's see. This was that video. See if I can give it to, where's the camera? 16 ounces exactly. So I'm figuring a 14 to 16 ounce commission with a bit of a beer head on top. Basically, that's the size when I was throwing. So it worked out after all. Thanks very much. It's been 3-4 weeks in production, this video. But anyway, it's done. So take care. Hope that helped you out.